Hello, hello everyone! Welcome back to live number 6 for the month in honor of National Adoption Awareness Month. And tonight we have a very lovely guest. Her name is Terra Cooper. She is an adoptive mother and also works for a nonprofit organization for adoption, United for Adoption. So when Terra requests to join in, we will get started shortly. Hello, welcome. Just waiting for Terra to come on. And here she is. She just needs to request, and I will accept. Alright, here she is. Hi.
Hey,
Hello, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. How was your day?
Good. Busy?
Busy? Yeah. Good. So we're just waiting for a few more people to join,
Yeah, no
and
worries.
then we can get started.
Awesome.
So what made it busy?
I'm just putting the Christmas decorations up today.
Oh, fun.
Takes a while.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, nice.
How was
Yeah,
your
I
day?
try not to decorate. I have this thing where I refuse to celebrate Christmas before the turkey. But with COVID and all, and just kind of like feeling a little blah and down about it, I decided to decorate,
I like
which
it.
is a
I know,
first for me to do before Thanksgiving.
but this year it's whatever. We do whatever we want, right?
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. See, we have
So
a
we have
couple people.
talked a
Hi,
little bit
Danielle.
a bouncy ball.
Hi, mental health advocate. Thank you for joining. So, what are your plans for Thanksgiving?
We're just staying at home with just my little family because in Utah we have really high COVID numbers. I'm sure a lot of other people do too,
Right.
but
We do too. Ours is increasing in Philadelphia.
yeah, we
Yeah.
had like 28 deaths today. So, and we
Wow.
only have, I think 3.5 million people here. So it's pretty high.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I think we have 4 or 5 thousand cases a day. It's bad.
That's right. Yeah, that's
So
very bad. Yeah.
yeah, not great. So
We
we're
gotta do
gonna
whatever
just
we gotta
stay
do
home,
to keep safe, right?
right? A really good cook, so he's gonna cook food and
Your
I'll
husband said?
decorate. I said, yeah, my husband's a really good cook, so I don't cook
Oh,
anything
good.
well. I love
Good.
it.
Okay. I guess we could probably start. I don't want to hold our guests up. So Tara, just you would tell people. Oh, actually, we have a question. Hi. How do you cope with anxiety during this pandemic? I have PTSD. Wow, I'm so sorry. I suffer with anxiety a lot. I've learned to just breathing exercises help for me, and taking time to myself, listening to music, distracting myself. During the summer, I would drive to the beach, go sit on the sand, and that's like my happy place. So find a happy place, go to it, and a lot of people like exercising helps, meditation helps. You just have to kind of find what helps you. I don't know if you're on any medication, but um, I didn't want to take medication, so I decided to just work on it on my own, basically. And it's had helps. I usually have 1 to 2 attacks a year, which is better than what I had before. I hope that helped. If you want to DM me after and we could talk more about anxiety, I'd love to talk to you. Thank you so much. Hi, welcome for joining. Indian Lake Discovery has been joining the past few lives, and thank you so much for coming back. Okay, so Tara, tell us a little bit about yourself.
So, as it pertains to adoption, I'm an adoptive mom. Biological son adopted our daughter, and I chair a nonprofit called United for Adoption. I also run a support and advocacy education group on Facebook. And I am really big into trying to make adoption more ethical because we know that it's going to continue to happen. So I try as much as I can to reach people before they adopt and get them as educated as possible before so that, it's just more ethical. As we know, there's
Right.
a lot of things ethical. And so if we could all, kind of come together and advocate for those laws changed and policies and then just doing it on our own as well, I think that we could make adoption better than it is. So
I agree. We're definitely going to circle back to what you just said about that. But so tell me a little bit. You said you adopted your daughter.
yes, yep.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about that, like the process of it, how old she was, and
So she is now 7. Sorry, I'm just gonna turn this volume down on my computer. It just can't went up. So I was told that I wouldn't be able to have children pretty early on when I was around 20. And so we kind of, when I got married, started looking into adoption anyway, just because we thought that was maybe the only way that we'd be able to have a family. Um, and my friend at the time was adopting from Haiti. And so we started looking at that. And a long story short, we started the process. I got pregnant. I miscarried at 11 weeks. And then I got pregnant soon after with our son, who was 10 weeks early. And then my second son he tried coming 13 weeks early. So I have very early babies and I'm on medication and bed rest and all these things. So it was just kind of really hard pregnancies. So we thought we were done with that. And then we just both felt like we weren't. And the adoption was the way we were going to grow our family. So we started looking into our options. We looked back into Haiti, but just felt like with having 2 boys at home and having to, go internationally and things, it wasn't the right choice at the time. So we went through a local agency, and yeah, so our daughter's birth mom found us on their their website where we had our profile,
okay.
and there were 1,200 families on there. And kind of a interesting thing is her last name is my maiden name. Or I guess we have the same maiden names now, and we found out we are cousins. We have the same fourth great grandfather.
Oh
Um,
my gosh,
so it
that's
was
crazy.
kind of a very random thing, but it was really cool when we figured that out, that we actually, so my daughter's last name for the first 6 months, since, she kept her birth mom's name before we finalized, she had the same last name that I did. So we all have had that same last name. So I think that's kind of a cool little
Yeah.
connection.
Wow, wow. Small world is right. My gosh. So how old is your daughter now?
She's 7.5.
7.5. And does she know that
Oh
she's
yeah.
adopted?
Oh yeah.
Okay. How did you tell her?
She's always known. It's always just been like we've had a relationship with both birth parents,
Okay.
and came to our house. We have family parties with them. I mean,
Oh,
obviously, COVID. Actually, this week her birth mom's in town, and so she lives out of state, and so she's here now. So we've been able to see her and her son twice already. So it's just really nice to see them. As adoptees may know, it's also hard, right? For birth moms and for adoptees. So we've had some hard discussions this week too, because visits can be really traumatic. Not saying
of
that
course.
visits, right? I think it's there, and I don't even visits is weird for me. I'm just like see them. We're really more like family. So even when it's hard, I think it's really important to have those discussions openly.
Mm-hmm.
And uh, a good piece of advice that I got a few years ago is if your child's old enough to ask the question, they're old enough to get the right or the real answer. And so when she was
I like.
asking some harder questions, her birth mom was actually still there. And so she came out and I asked her if she would answer those for her. And so it's just really nice to be able to have that connection where, when she asks questions, she can go right to her birth mom.
Yeah.
She hasn't really had questions for her birth dad yet, but it's just a different relationship. And so,
Of course.
yeah, I would definitely recommend whatever you can do to have that openness, no matter, even if birth parents are in jail, you could
Mm-hmm.
still you could still have connections, and as long as
Right.
the child is safe, because obviously I know that there are certain situations, it's I feel like not the most common, right, where the child is in danger. But if it is, I obviously understand that. I'm not talking about those situations, but there's always
Right.
ways to keep those connections and still be honest with the child about, where birth parents are, or in ways that also don't paint them negatively, because we don't want to do
Exactly.
that, right? Because it's still part of the child is part of them. And so if you ever say
Absolutely.
negative about them, then that reflects on the child, and you would never want to do that.
Exactly. I agree. So what about your two boys? So they how did, of course they know that
Yeah.
she's adopted, but were there any issues with that, like the relationship? Like did they ever like they don't see her as their adopted sister, right? They just like
Yeah, it's their sister. And I mean, my daughter also has other siblings, her birth siblings, and they
okay.
understand that, she has other siblings too. And it's kids, I think if we complicate things, it makes it harder, right? Like, I
Mm-hmm.
think that adults overly complicate things. So if you just, I mean, we love more than one child. Why can't they love more than one parent? Why can't they have more than one sibling? And, I
Exactly.
grew up in a family that was, I had half siblings that lived with me, and I don't think of them as half siblings, but anyway, my dad had full custody. And so I kind of knew that dynamic. They'd go somewhere every other weekend, but it was still like my siblings, and I'd kind of get upset. People would be like, "Oh, it's your half brother, half sister." I'm like, "No, they're my brother and sister." So I think,
Exactly.
well, when you put labels on things, or what, you know what I mean? Like, you just don't have
Mm-hmm.
to overcomplicate it. Explain the realities, and kids,
Exactly.
they get it. It's not a big deal to them. Like
Right.
when the first time we introduced her to and my boys to her birth sister that's older than her, I thought, maybe they would be confused or anything like that. But I was like, her birth dad has another daughter, and they're like, oh, okay. And, and that's her sister. Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Like kids
Just being
are,
upfront right from the
yeah,
beginning solves a lot of problems.
right. Like there was a book, and I won't say the name of it, that just came out that had a name that kind of made the birth mom into a mystical creature, which
Oh,
I don't agree with. I'm like, they're real people. They're their mom.
of
Um,
course.
my daughter last year, she wanted to, when we were visiting with her in the other state, wanted to call her mommy while we were out there. And I was like, okay, fine. Yeah, call her mommy. And the only thing, I will be honest, it was confusing, is when we were both together and she'd say mommy, and both of us would look and be like,
You're both reacting right.
yeah, who are you
And that's
talking?
what could be awkward too.
Yeah, or we would be like, wait, or we'd ignore her thinking, oh, she's talking to the other person. So,
Yeah.
having, like, if she would have said mommy and then something mommy, A and B or whatever, may have been a little easier. So if someone's like going through that, that's my recommendation, is when you're together, at least like maybe have that. But I mean, you know, like it's okay to have more than one mom. Like she always
Right.
says, because I have, two moms and two dads, and it's like her normal. So if you make
Yeah.
that, which it is, and it's their reality, then it's not as, I think, weird, or if you try to mystify, or like, oh, the stork brought you, like none of that. Like
No, no. Wow. And that's really cool. And you said the birth father is not in the picture, or
is not as often. It's kind of this,
okay.
but we have contact, and do see him in person, and it's just not as much as I would like. I would love them over, all the time. I'm just a really open person anyway, but
Mm-hmm.
yeah, we do have an open relationship with him too.
Now, are they her biological parents together, or
They're not. They were for a year after she was born, and then they separated, and then now her birth mom's remarried, and has a little boy, and so yeah,
okay,
yeah.
nice. Wow. Okay. Um, so what else about tell me more about, the adoption process for you. Like was it hard? Was it easy, or was it how long did it take?
So looking back on it, I would answer that a lot different than I would maybe a year from there, right? Like, um, so we were on the adoption site for, I want to say, 6 months. We had already been matched with another expectant mom, and she decided to parent, which is fine,
Okay.
you know.
What could
And
be
then,
devastating for you guys,
but honestly,
right?
like, I mean, it was, I don't know. She had two daughters that she was parenting, and to be honest, I felt okay with it, because like I don't know, it was just really hard for me. I'll talk about placement in a second, but just knowing that her daughters will be together, I was actually like, oh, good. They get to stay with their sister.
Yeah.
A week later, we were contacted by my daughter's birth mom, and she was maybe around 20 weeks, I want to say. So we still had quite a few months to get to know each other. Um, Looking back, I was very naive to the adoption process and like what I should know. And I was going to tell some people that are watching, like some of the things that I wish I would have known before we
Yeah.
adopted.
Yeah,
Um,
please do.
and with placement, I'll just go that real quick. So at placement, honestly, that day I didn't want to go. And the reason why is, I was actually in the delivery room. I'm a photographer. And so she wanted me to take pictures of the birth. And because I had biological children, I knew what that moment felt like when you have that child and you will literally like die that moment for that child. Like, it's just so, you just never felt love like that. At least I hadn't, and this is obviously, I'm just speaking from my experiences. So I knew that she had that bond with her daughter, and I was like, how could I ever like take someone's child? Like, this is messed up. Like, to be honest, I was like, how do people do this? Like, people should not do this. And so thankfully, I talked to my friend that day, and because I'm like, I'm not going. Like, this is not happening. I'm not going to take someone's child. And she's like, you know what? You are making the choice for her, and this is her choice. Like, you need to let her make the choice. If she decides that she wants to parent, it's her choice.
Right.
But you don't get to make that choice for her. And so I went, and yeah, it was awful. I got probably had the post-adoption depression syndrome after, because you just honestly, you feel like you stole someone's child. And again, I know other people don't feel like that, but that's how I felt. And I don't know if it's because I had biological children, or if it's just because I became really close with her birth mom, that it felt really unnatural and very wrong that I was taking someone's child. I obviously, it's like your logic, you feel, that you didn't do that. Like, it wasn't first, it was, everyone's free will and all that, but it still felt really wrong. And so then when I found an adoption group where other moms had felt the same, then I was like, oh, okay, I'm not crazy. Because I felt really like bad that I felt that way. Because you see, like, on the Lifetime movies where the adoptive parents are like crying at the hospital because they're so happy to meet their baby, and I've been dreaming of you. And it just wasn't like that for me at all.
Yeah.
And obviously I love my daughter, but I also know that she has another mom too, and that's okay, like, and I will take that away from her. So yeah, that's kind of how our adoption
And
process
it's
went.
okay that you felt that way. And I'm really glad that you found other people so you don't feel like you were alone,
Right.
with thoughts.
And then after, so probably a little less than a year after we adopted, I started that adoption group on Facebook, and it's been really my sanity. I mean, it's really good because I was before in a group that just had adopted parents, and it was really hard for me because I wanted to learn more from the adoptees and the birth parents, which I would highly recommend to adoptive parents, or people that are hoping to adopt, to find accounts of birth moms and of adoptees, as many as you can, and read as much as you can, and gain as much practice as you can, because every situation is different, as we all know, right? But being able to have that empathy and understanding of the other side, or other, part of the triad, is really imperative, I think, to becoming a better adoptive parent. Because if you surround yourself with adoptive parents, then you only hear that one perspective. And I feel like I learn the most from adoptees and birth parents, because I can empathize more with, or I understand more adoptive parents because I've been there, but like, I learn the most from the birth parents and the adoptees.
Wow. That's really cool. Wow. So trying to think of some questions to ask you.
Okay, and if you want, I have some things I can go through too that I was excited to share.
Oh, absolutely, go for it. Like I said, like when I've been telling like anyone who comes on like with me is I give them the platform to talk, because when I go on people, like, I'll talk and tell my story, but sometimes I get tired of hearing my own story. So like I want people to I want to give my guests the platform to just talk.
No,
So
thank
take
you.
the wheel and just talk about whatever you want to talk about.
Yeah, so when you asked me to come on here, I thought, what could I talk about? Because, I don't want to talk about how adoptees feel. I don't want to talk about birth parents feel, because I'm not an adoptee or a birth parent. And I feel like you shouldn't. That's something I learned maybe a little later than after adopting, that we really need to elevate the voices of the adoptees and the birth parents, because adoptive parents seem to have the most narrative. I think it's changed, honestly, in maybe like the last 3 or 4 years. when we first adopted, it was pretty much adoptive parents were the voice of adoption. And I'm happy to see that
Okay.
change. So the first thing that I would say that I would hope that people would, or people that are hoping to adopt, or if you've already adopted, you can look into these things, is trauma. As we know, adoption starts with trauma.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't mean that someone is damaged. It just means they went through a traumatic event. And we all go through traumatic events in our life, right?
Mm-hmm.
Adoption is one layer of trauma that that person may have, right? So I know when I first started learning about adoption trauma or the primal wound, I would get kind of like, well, my daughter won't be like that, or we'll make sure that she doesn't have that, just love will be enough type of mind.
Right.
And the more I looked into it, it's a very naive mindset to have. And so I'm really glad that I've decided to research more and be open to learning more about trauma. And I probably would say our daughter exhibited trauma like that you could see when she was like 1 or 2. Like you could physically see that she was having that separation anxiety or the things, with her birth mom. And so
And how could you tell with that?
like there was one case in particular, it was like after her birth mom had left, she went up to me. She couldn't even say many words. So she was probably under 2 because she talked really early. Anyway, but she just grabbed my face and she was just like, my mama, my mama. But she was like really sad. And I just know that, she was trying to figure that out. Like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? So I'm like kids at young ages. And so not only research trauma, but find adoption competent therapists,
Mm-hmm.
people that know about adoption and, therapy for you, therapy for the child, therapy for everyone, therapy
Mm-hmm.
is really important. We,
Absolutely.
we have times where we don't need it and times that we do. And that's kind of, we're probably going to be,
I mean, I'm in therapy and
right?
I
I mean,
constantly tell people there's nothing wrong with it. It doesn't
right.
mean you're crazy. It doesn't mean you're suicidal. It just means that you have struggles that you need healing from and you need help.
And medication or whatever you like, as you talked about the first,
Exactly.
that's super important. So looking into trauma and being open to learning about it, I think is huge. Again, reading the Primal Wound book or looking into the Primal Wound. I used to think since we adopted her as a newborn, then she'd be fine, right? And
Yeah.
what we've come to find out, sorry, I have a tree that has flocking on it and I've been putting up Christmas lights and I just felt
Oh,
like,
it's okay.
sorry,
I had a coughing attack earlier over pretty much nothing.
I just get to kill
So,
this. So, I lost my trail. Oh, the primal wound. Okay, so with that, even if they're newborns, they can have that trauma, and acknowledging it, validating it, and doing what you can to help lessen it
yeah.
is, something that I would hope people would do.
Well, they also say the first couple years of a child's development is the most important too.
Right. And, look, if you adopt a child that's been institutionalized, we were talking about this, being that's a whole other layer of trauma that you have to deal with too. And again, knowing that love isn't enough. Like love is great,
Yeah.
but it's just not enough. It isn't. And so you need to do the research into those things. The other thing I already said, follow adoptees, some good ones that I love. Your page right here. I am adopted. Diary of a Not So Angry Asian Adoptee. The daily.
Yeah.
How does it feel to be adopted? The declassified adoptee. Your
What
mind.
was the third one? You cut out a little bit.
Oh,
You
sorry.
you said
So
I am adopted. You said the not so.
I have a not so angry Asian adoptee.
Okay, and then
The
after that.
adoptee, how does it feel to be adopted? The declassified adoptee, your mindful brain. So those would be some that, and there's tons out there, but those like if you
There's
need,
actually the two girls that came on with me last week, Melissa and Sarah, wonderful girls. Melissa is adoptee underscore thoughts, and Melissa, no, that's Melissa, and then Sarah is adoption underscore words. And I don't know if you saw the post I had up, but like if you want to go look at my page, the videos are there with both of them, and they had such wonderful things to share, and I think you should definitely go follow them.
yeah, for sure. I love following
Yeah.
adoptees.
My friend Allie Jameson was on. She's my adoptee sister, and she actually has support groups every Tuesday night at I think 5 o'clock Pacific time.
Okay.
So yeah, so Allie Jameson, you could follow. I mean, I'm trying to think of another adoptee that was on. Oh, trauma, trauma to. I can't remember the full name, but it's trauma something transformation. Her
Okay.
name is Shantae. She's amazing. So I'll send you all those names, but
Put it in the comments so everyone else can follow too, because yeah, those are awesome.
yeah.
Um, one thing I would definitely do is ask yourself, as someone that's adopting, why you want to adopt.
Mm-hmm.
So if you are adopting because you think you're going to save a child, or you're adopting to fill that hole from infertility, I would take some time and research why adoption doesn't save children. You know, it moves them to a different situation. That's what happens, right? And obviously, I know there's situations where maybe a child would die if they stayed in that situation. I'm again not talking about that, but people that feel like they're going to go save these children, you know, look at that. And then also, adoption doesn't or cure infertility. Get some therapy for your infertility issues, because it's not, you know, having a child is not going to just magically cure that.
Right.
So if
Well, I
you are
do want to circle back on the one. So you said about it's not like saving a child.
right,
I get what you're saying with that, but in situations of like orphans,
right. So
like
that
for me, I was an orphan. It does in that case, it is you're saving a child, but I know what you mean in the context of
of
dealing with
like
the birth parents and being there at the hospital, like you said.
you know, that's a huge thing with transracial adoption, the saving the children, in international as well. So if we do research into international adoption, which is another topic that people need to look into, a lot of the orphanages, the kids have living parents, right? And the main
Yeah.
reason why the kids are in the orphanages is they don't have incomes, they don't have jobs. So instead of, you know, instead of like, oh, I'm going to go adopt a child to save it, why don't you invest in the infrastructure, invest in jobs? So like in Haiti, there's an organization that's amazing called Papillon Marketplace. It started by adoptive parents that went down there to adopt, and when they found out what was really happening, and the story's on the documentary Poverty Inc. So if anyone wants to watch it, it's amazing. They decided to set up uh, their marketplace where they make T-shirts and jewelry and all different things to give these parents jobs so they can parent their children. And so their tagline is orphan prevention through job creation. And I think that's something that everyone can do, right? Like for Christmas,
Yeah.
go get that, you know, go get some jewelry, go get a t-shirt, go get, you know, they have decorations, they have lots of things. So
Yeah.
that you can actually keep these families together. Am I still there?
Yeah, now you are. Yeah, your audio went
Oh,
out for a
I can't
minute.
hear you. Yeah, no, my sister, I forgot to do the do not disturb thing. Hold on, let me. I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
I was like, I was gonna put the do not disturb and I forgot to do that. And my family's the one that they will keep calling. So I'm like,
You know
oh,
what's weird? The do not disturb works unless you're on it. It
oh,
doesn't work if you're on it. You have to have it locked.
got ya.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're on
I
do not.
just learned that.
Um, so, you know, there's other organizations that they're trying to set up foster care systems in these countries that don't have foster care so that children aren't in institutions. And so,
Mm-hmm.
yes, adopting a child from an institution will put them in a better situation most of the time, right? But we also need to realize that it's not the fix. It's not a
Right.
long fix, right? It's a temporary for that child fix. And so, another good documentary is called The Traffickers, and the first episode was about adoption. And in that, they talked about in Uganda, where people, again, they think that they are doing like going to save these children, right? And so these couples go in to adopt a child, and let's say they want a blind child because they think, oh, no one will want to adopt a blind child. We'll adopt a blind child. Well, if that orphanage doesn't have a blind child, they'll go find a blind child. And whether that's by kidnapping or by paying for the child, that's how,
Mm-hmm.
his adoption makes a lot of money for them. And so we really need to look into, you know, how adoption is also linked with child trafficking. And it's not just another topic to look up is the Marshallese adoption situations that we have in the United States.
Okay.
Child trafficking happens through Marshallese adoptions. And we recently there was a lawyer that was arrested, Paul Peterson, for
Mm-hmm.
smuggling and fraud, and there's many more like him. And so for people to know about what they're doing, in these adoption situations where they're coercing these mothers. They're paying pretty much for them to get pregnant. He was actually taking like girls as young as 14 out of prostitution camps in the Marshallese Islands to deliver here. And, you know, you have like maybe 10 women in the same house that are all delivering these babies, and they placed 4 and 5 times. Like, that's not okay.
No.
For anyone to think it's okay that we keep buying into that system. And I'm sorry, the people that are wrong is the adopted parents. Like, you're the one purchasing that child. You're the one that's buying into that system.
And
So
do you think they know?
sometimes, yes, I know that they know, because I've told these personal conversations with people, told them exactly what they were doing, and they still use those lawyers because they're cheaper, they're fast, and they're usually pretty guaranteed that they'll get a baby. And it's
That's
just,
not the right way.
no, it's not okay. Because what are you going to tell that child later when that story comes out? A Google search is going to find out that if you use Paul Peterson, oh, so was I a trafficked child? You know what I mean? So it's like, is it worth having that on your conscience, you know, because you can a child for $35,000 pretty much guaranteed. And it's just not something that I would hope that a lot of people would be okay with.
Yeah.
There are some, but you know what? There's a lot that aren't, because since we've started educating about this situation, probably for the last 5 years, 5 or 6 years, my group has been able to not really convince, but I guess educate people enough to know not to do those, you know, and instead do different things. And I had a friend that she refused to do those kinds of adoptions and went about it the ethical way, which took her, I think it was 2 or 3 years before they actually had a match. But she knows that she did it in a way that was as most ethical as she could.
Right.
The time to learn about those things. And so that's a huge thing, is learn as much as you can about those processes. Like when we looked into Haiti, I didn't realize that, like, for instance, some of the kids were in clinics and some were in orphanages, and you had to pay bribes to get them from the clinic into the orphanage. And if they didn't get out of the clinic, a lot of times they would die. A lot of the kids with HIV, they wouldn't feed and they would starve to death, right? Little babies and things. And so
Terrible.
at the time, though, like a bribe, like, well, we're saving a child, but then what are you actually also doing? You're paying into that system to keep doing that, right?
Yeah.
So we can't keep paying for these children and expecting things to change and be better. We have to demand that, you know, that no, it's not okay. I'm not going to pay bribes. I'm not going to pay, you know, a lawyer that's doing unethical things. I'm not going to pay someone, you know, to
Yes,
do it.
child trafficking is so sad. Absolutely, it is.
Right.
Wow.
So there's that. Oh, foster care. So my mom is a former foster care child. She aged out of foster care. So I feel like I grew up knowing what trauma, you know, that causes. So I do understand. Yeah. I wish to this day that she would have been adopted. Thanksgiving and Christmases, that would have been awesome to have some grandparents that cared about us, you know, birthdays, things like that. I never had that on that side, you know, growing up as parents. So if you are looking at foster care, know that there's some teenagers that are pretty amazing, that have nothing to do, that what happened to them is not their fault. And they do want parents, and they, even as adults, they need parents. Like my mom needs parents still to this day. She's in her 60s, you know, she never had parents that cared. And it definitely has caused her trauma. So looking into foster care, number one thing is know that it's about reunification. It's not about adopting children. The number one goal of foster care should always be reunifying those children with their parents. And two is, you know, really do look into, if you can, into the older kids, because there's a lot of kids that are already, that, you know, the legal rights have already been severed, and, you know, they're just waiting for homes. And, you know, kids need homes and they need families. So I'm not against foster care at all.
Well, they need to be reunited with their families, but in good environments, though.
Absolutely.
Not like, so you're saying like not when they're come from like an abusive environment or like that kind of situation, but definitely, but in terms of like poverty.
Exactly, because foster care kids that are poor, right? I know of a certain situation where it is a white couple. She is a drug addict, but they're very wealthy. DCFS, she abuses her children. She does all kinds of things. DCFS has been called many times on them, and yet they still have their children, and nothing's ever happened. So their poverty definitely plays into whose children get taken away and whose don't. And that we need to acknowledge and look into and be better. And so, yeah, I'm like, and I don't want to tell people like you should do this and you shouldn't do, you know, that. Obviously, you need to do what you feel like is right
You're
for you.
advocating the right information though. Like
Right.
you want them to be like you said, you want them to be reunited. Like foster children should be reunited, but in good situations. If it's not going to be a good situation, then they need to find a family that's going to love and care for them and give them that safe environment that they need.
And I wish that my mom never or would have been adopted because honestly, like her parents never got better. Does that make sense? Like they never became good parents. They never loved my mom. And that honestly has caused her even more trauma because she, she lost her dad pretty early. He was pretty young when he had lung cancer. And she never got to have that relationship. So she grieves that, right? That she never got to have that relationship. And
Yeah,
she's good, but I feel like if she would have been adopted and had like parents that really did treat her like family and cared about her, it would lessen the trauma. The trauma would still be there, but
for sure,
yeah.
definitely.
Let's talked about international.
It's so weird. Like, call me. I think I'm like blind by like to like. I mean, I know a lot about adoption, but I always known it of my own personal experiences, and I always looked at it as like an adoptee point of view for pretty much my whole life, and like the struggles an adoptee has and or had, and but I'm just starting to learn, you know, what it must have been like for my birth mother, and I'm learning so much what you're addressing now. Like I didn't even know about a lot of things with adoption, and I'm learning it every day, and that, like you said about the scan, like this what I'm trying to use, to figure out the word I'm trying to use. Yeah, like having 14-year-old children, getting pregnant and then selling their babies, and I think it's just things just I just never knew even have like exist until now. Like I'm just finding out.
And this is
And
why people just know it before they adopt, not necessarily because then they'll be like, oh, I know I can't adopt, but then you at least kind of know when you know better, you do better, right?
yeah, you have to adopt smart.
Right. Well, and I made some mistakes when we were first, after we first adopted, because I felt like I needed to educate everyone around me, and I felt like I knew so much, and so I was very open with things I shouldn't have been open with, and like my daughter's story and things, like I try to keep that pretty private and like specific details, like I really don't try to share too much anymore. And I think also I was trying to like paint it as this happy, wonderful thing, even though I wasn't feeling that way, because I wanted, like everyone around me seemed to think adoption was so amazing and joyful. Like, why wasn't I feeling it? So you kind of like project that and try to put it out there. And not saying that we don't have happy moments. We obviously
Well,
do.
it can be absolutely joyful,
Yeah.
but like the long adoption is joyful, and then it comes with trauma. Like
Yeah.
so,
It's very
yeah,
bittersweet, right? There's
yeah.
not a moment, like anytime like my daughter would have her first time she walked or things like that, it wouldn't just be a moment that even in your head, if you can think of this, like I couldn't have that moment by myself. Because in my head, what was I thinking? I was thinking like her birth mom and dad are missing this. And all the other people that are missing this, like they're missing they're missing these things. And no matter how much I try to record and share and things, it's just not the same as seeing
No,
it
it's not.
first person. And so, knowing the difference between having a biological children and an adopted child, that there's a difference. I had people, they've said to me like, oh, there's no difference. There absolutely is a difference. And it's not a bad thing, but there is a difference. Like I don't have to share that mind space, and not that it's a bad thing. I'm just saying it's different.
Right, exactly.
Look at that. A lot of adoptive moms sometimes are very insecure about their roles as mom, and they try to like hang on to that, like I'm the only mom, and they won't share those things and stuff. And it's like it's okay to share. I mean, we did look at kids, it's okay to share, but really it is like it's just different. So looking at it is not a negative thing, but a different thing, I think would be really helpful for adoptive parents to kind of like be able to let go of those insecurities. That yeah, it's not ever going to be just your child. Like
Exactly.
it's just not. And again, that's okay. It's okay to have it not be your child, and you do need to grieve that loss, right? That it will never just be just your child and your thing, but you have to kind of get over yourself and realize that it won't be just your child, and that's okay because someone gave you that opportunity to have that child.
Exactly.
You should try to share things with them and to show them how much you love them as much as you can.
I think that's perfect. Very well said.
Okay, so next thing, we kind of over that already, but Georgia Tan, if anyone hasn't heard of Georgia Tan, do you know who Georgia Tan is?
I don't.
Okay, so she, starting in the late 1920s, started the Tennessee Home for Children. And in that, they found out how profitable adoption was and how some rich people wanted these blonde-haired, blue-eyed, curly-haired kids. So they would often steal babies, kidnap babies. She had doctors and lawyers and city officials involved in it. It went on for almost 30 years and until the 1950s. She actually even worked with Eleanor Roosevelt on adoption laws. And during this time,
Okay.
adoption birth certificates were changed because when they were kidnapping children, they obviously didn't want them to have ties to their birth families. So
Right.
that's why we have now the birth certificates where the birth parents are completely erased.
Mm-hmm.
The reason why is because they were trafficking children. So now we're advocating to, have birth certificates that have birth parents on them, or at least have the adoptees be able to have access to their original birth certificates in every state, because some states they can, some states they can't. So she did a lot of horrible things to adoption, including closed adoptions. Wasn't a thing before her. She instituted, like that they should pretty much erase the birth family, because then the child, and also that they should never know that they were adopted. So the shame was added. So there's a book, it's a fictional book, but it's based on, the real things, called Before We Were Yours.
Okay.
That's a really good read. I listened to it on Audible. It's a really good one. So if people want to learn more about what happened there, that's definitely something to look into, to know why adoption was the way it was and why it is that now, and why we're having that shift back to open adoptions, and why it's important, for adoptees to know who they are and have those connections, because this woman tried to pretty much destroy it because she was making a lot of money trafficking these children.
Terrible.
Yeah, and murder children and abuse children. I mean, it was really, really bad stuff. But they would sell them in the paper, as ads, would you like to bring these home for Christmas? There's actual ads you can see.
Like they're puppies, or oh,
Absolutely.
that's terrible.
Yeah. And there was some celebrities that bought these children from there. They would steal babies. They would tell a lot of times that the babies had died and steal them at birth. Another Dr. Hicks, TLC did a whole thing on him. He was doing the same thing, taking babies, in the back alley and selling them to people, and telling women that their babies had died, or
Oh my gosh.
for, if they wanted an abortion, he would make them wait until 32 or 33 weeks and hope the baby would live, and then sell the babies. So we definitely have, and that's not even, there's then Native American things, what happened in that population, in Canada with their Native population, and Australia with their Native population. That's a whole other topic to look into.
Wow.
The erasure of their culture and their families and things like that. So that's something to look into for sure. Another thing would be agencies, asking them lots of hard questions, knowing which questions to ask them is really important. With counseling, do they offer counseling to the expectant mom and dad before and after placement? Because that's super important, as we know, therapy and counseling. And then what's the educational requirements for people that are hoping to adopt? A lot of times it's maybe 10 hours or 20 hours or things like that. But it's do you really stress to them that this is just we're giving you this tiniest little part of the iceberg, right? And underneath is this thing that you need to learn, knowing that, that 10 hours is not going to last you through this whole adoption. And then with transracial adoption, what's their education on that? Because that should be a whole other thing. People really think, I used to think that if you didn't check every box for the race, that you were a racist, you should just love any child that comes to you. But now I'm every box that you check, whether it has to do with race or special needs or anything, if you haven't done the research into every single one of those boxes, don't check them, because you're not ready to adopt. And then also, if your child will be your only person of color in your family and your friends, no, don't do it. It's not okay for that child. It's not okay for that child to be the only in that situation. It's not okay for that child to be, kind of the token or the whatever. So if you do not already surround yourself with people of color, with a lot of different, cultures, then I would not recommend adopting transracially. And if that's something you really feel strongly that you should do, well, then you should not do it genuinely, but try to reach out more to people of color, make genuine friends with people of color, and go to, learn more about cultures and things like that. So surround yourself well before you adopt, because, when your child's a teenager and you haven't done any of that, and then you're wondering why suddenly racism is a big deal,
Mm-hmm.
and you haven't done anything to help that child, it's going to be extra layers of trauma.
Of
And so
course.
it's always about lessening those layers of trauma. So transracial adoption is a thing that's very personal to me. My daughter's not transracially adopted, but knowing that we were going to adopt from Haiti very naively has opened my eyes to like what we could have, I definitely had a different mindset 14 years ago, 15 years ago when we were trying to adopt from Haiti. And I really thought like, oh, just love, I would love any child. I'd love a black child and I would get mad at anyone that didn't, but that's not enough. That's not good enough. There's a lot more things that you need to do.
Of course.
Adoption. And there's a really great group on Facebook called TAP 101. It's just TAP, Transracial Adoption Perspectives. And you could start there and then they admit you into a bigger group where you get to learn more topics. So, joining those groups and learning as much as you can about really hard topics and being open to learning is super important. Like
Absolutely.
mirrors and implicit and just, all of that things because your whiteness won't protect your child. It just won't. Um, People think, they'll be in that bubble all the time, but they'll be adults one day or they'll be teenagers and they'll be out. They could go to a park with a Nerf gun one day and you can't protect them all the time. And so, knowing that you're going to have to do a lot more work and you're going to lose a lot of family and friends, and that's your reality. And if you're okay with that, then great, move forward.
Exactly.
Then it's not the right option for you. And that's okay. It's
Yeah,
okay to that conclusion of, that's not the right option for us.
exactly. I love absolutely everything you said tonight, and I feel like you were addressing everything perfectly. I do unfortunately, have to wrap it up. I would love to hear more, but eventually it's going to cut us off in 10 minutes,
You're good.
and I don't want you to get cut off in the middle of conversation. So, I want to ask you, I don't even know what that flash was. Sorry. I was, oh, it's my TV. It's doing weird things right now. I'm sorry.
Oh, you're good.
What does adoption mean to you?
Um,
I've been asking everyone coming on,
that you get
and
to
everyone has different answers, which is really nice.
yeah, I just think it means you get to choose your family. We have chosen, I guess we were chosen first, right? We didn't choose the expectant mom. She chose us, and then we chose to, accept that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that it just kind of teaches you that family is more than blood.
Yes.
Like one funny example. So my daughter has a good friend that she's adopted, and she's black. And a few months ago, she said something, and she's like, "Wait, she's not my cousin." And I was like, "No, sweetheart, she's not your cousin." She's like, "What are you talking?" Like she was genuinely shocked that this friend that we hang out with quite a bit was not her cousin. And so kids teach you that it's like even that, and not saying like how some people are like, oh, they don't see race. She obviously sees that her friend is black. I'm not saying that. What I mean is that she knows that family is not necessarily like who you're related to blood-wise, right? And she could have like, what? I mean, to be honest, my sister's children are her cousins just as much as her black friend is her cousin in reality, right? So if she wants to, call her cousin, that is just fine. So I do think that adoption is something that you learn, that family is definitely who you choose.
Absolutely. I couldn't have said it better than myself. Very nice. So does anyone have any questions for Tara before we wrap up?
I will put that, I made it that slideshow that has more things. I will put that in the comments. So if anyone wants to go and look at that later or share adopted parents, it's a lot to go over, but I think that the topics are super important to learn about as much as you can before.
Absolutely.
You've already adopted, you can still learn. I learned about pretty much everything after. So
Yeah, definitely. And it's not just about go look at pictures, go find an agency, look at pictures, pick a child, and then go adopt it. There's so much more in between all of that, and
right.
definitely. So it doesn't look like we really have any questions. So thank you everyone for joining, for chiming in. We love your feedback, and go follow Tara at United for Adoption. She has so much more amazing things to address that we can't get to tonight, but Thank you all. Tara, thank you so much for taking time and talking with me tonight.
Oh, thank you for asking me.
Yes, and I'm gonna have to stalk your page a little bit and go read more and get more educated with adoption, more than I thought I already was.
Well, and you educate me as well. I appreciate when I get to learn new things from adoptees as well.
Aw. Well, sometime I'll have to share my story with you, but that'll be another time.
Sounds great.
All right, Tara, have a wonderful Thanksgiving with your family, and we'll be in touch soon.
All right, sounds good. Thank you. Happy
Okay.
one.
Bye. Bye, everyone. Happy Thanksgiving.